So here is the Pixelcade LED mounted on the base plate of your Rec Room Masters. So just to give you a reference here. And so the way this is going to work is you're going to reuse your existing Pixelcade mount, which is right here. And you're going to have to drill an additional 4 holes. So one here, and here, and here. And these are just wood screws. And those basically are just going to screw directly into this wood base. And it doesn't really matter where the holes, just somewhere below here is fine. It doesn't have to be exact because you're not going to see the holes because we're going to have this piece eventually over it. So the masking tape is on, but you would take it off, and this is basically going to diffuse the LED panels just like you had before. Now, unfortunately, this piece, you cannot reuse the existing one that you have because that one is just slightly too long. So this will come with the kit, with the conversion kit. And that's pretty much it. So again, you got these hex stands right here to mount that LED diffuser. Behind these wood screws are spacers. Those are included. If you watch the video, you get a closer look at what the spacers and how to install those. And then the only other thing is that this is mounted flush against the base plate. So on the back of the existing mount is the board. And so obviously that's not going to work because the board is going to run into this. So basically what we're going to do is behind this base plate, we're going to drill a 1-inch hole. We're going to unmount the board on the back of this, string the wires through that 1-inch hole, and then mount the board on the inside of the Rec Room cab. That's how it's going to mount. And we'll walk through how to do that in this video. So first thing we got to do, let's just take a look at our kit. So we got a new mounting board for the Pixelcade board. We got some hardware here. We've got a little longer ribbon cable. And then of course our Pixelcade. So let's just go ahead and flip it over. And the first thing we'll need to do is remove the PCB board. So let's go ahead and do that right now. These are just nylon screws, so you can just actually undo them by hand. Okay, you can unplug this guy, you can unplug this, and let's just take the board off and just set that aside. That board's actually going to mount on this guy, and we'll do that later. And then this small little IDC ribbon cable, we're not going to need this anymore, so you can just toss that aside. And then what we'll do is we're going to actually undo these screws, and let's first clip off these little tie wraps. Okay, so let's undo these. Careful not to clip the actual wires. Okay, so let's take this off. Okay, we'll set that aside. We are going to reuse this guy. And then we're just going to undo these black screws right here. We're going to reuse these screws, so just set them aside. Okay, and then you notice that there's these screws, the last screws on the end. Those are the hex stands. You can leave those on because we're going to use those in the new mount. So leave the hex stands on for now. So let's also remove these 4 nylon screws that we're mounting the board. So we don't need those anymore. So let's go ahead and remove those guys. I've got a little tool like this that makes it a little bit easier. Okay, so we basically got our mount removed. We still got the hex stands on there. Those are still there. All right, so first thing you want to make sure before we remount this guy is make sure you've got the orientation right. So just look for this up arrow pointing up, and then the LED panels also pointing up. So the arrows are matching. You know you got it the right way. If it's like this and you don't see the arrow, that's the wrong way. And so take your LED panels, just kind of put them together like that. So again, these are 2 panels. Put them together. And then just line up the holes. Oh, sorry. Before I do that though, I need to put on my tie wraps. So take these 3 tie wraps, and you see these little holes for them. Let's just stick those in there. This will just help us with the cables to make the cables a little neater. Okay, so we got our 3 tie wraps. Now let's go ahead and again line up our LED panels. And then put the mount on, and then you just line up the holes. And you'll notice that the LED panels have a little notch. Actually, there's one here, 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 and there. So that's how you know you got it all lined up. And then let's take those same screws and screw them in. Okay, got everything screwed in. Then let's take that middle. Okay, so remember we actually had that shorter cable. The shorter one you're going to not use. The middle size one you do want to use. That's going to go in the middle here. So, and then these have a notch. So these will only go in one way, so just line up the notch. And then you can just kind of fold it over like that. And then take that same power cable that we had before. And on this power cable, actually for this mount it doesn't really matter which side, which orientation it goes, but I always like to be consistent, so I'm going to have the male jack on the left and the female jack on the right. Okay, so let's just go ahead and plug into our LED panels. Again, these also are notched, so they only go in one way. And then now what we'll do is we'll just, and we want to do this so this is low profile. So basically, the way this is going to work is this is going to mount flush against the Rec Room Master's base plate. So this is basically going to mount there. And then because these wires stick out a little bit, so as you can see those stick out a little bit, we have these little spacers. So we're going to drill new holes, we're going to put the spacers there, but we don't want the thing sticking out too much, so when we tie these cables down, we want them to be as flat as possible, basically. So I would go like this. You don't want to, you know, double it over because that's going to stick out more. So we just go something like this. That should be fine. Okay. And then let's take our tie wrap and tie it down. And you can actually, yeah, okay, so you can actually even move this one, just move it over like that. So again, it's as flush and flat as possible. That's the idea. And then just cinch down the tie wrap. And then do the same thing over here. And same thing over here. Okay, so let me show you another view of this. So basically, if I'm looking down on it, you see how we got this cable as flat as possible, and basically the one that's sticking out the most are these little power cables right here. We're going to have these little spacers, and so the spacers are going to give us enough leeway when we mount it against the rec room. So that's how that's going to work. We can clip off these excess on the tie wraps. Make sure that's nice and tight. Looks like it is. Okay, so at this point, what we need to do is we're basically all set, but we gotta do one thing, which is drill the holes that we're going to mount this guy on with the wood screws. So here's the wood screws here. Don't worry about being precise here because there's going to be a front plex covering this whole thing. So if you kind of drill ugly holes or they're not centered, it doesn't matter, you're not going to see it because this front plex is going to cover everything. So, but that said, what you can do is just flip it over. And then what I would do is I would go where this first screw is here and then just go up 1 inch. So I've got a little measuring thing on my mat. So I'm going to go 1 inch. I'm just going to mark that. And again, you can just kind of eyeball this because this part you're not going to see, and 1 inch here. Okay, now let's go on the other side. Okay, so let's mark this 1 inch and 1 inch here. Okay. And then now just take your handy screw gun. Make sure you drill it to the diameter of the screw here. And let's just drill that real quick. Okay, now this mount is wood, actually. If you've got one of the earlier mounts for Rec Room Masters, you're one of the earlier customers, then this would be black acrylic. You can still drill into acrylic, you just have to be a little more careful. You probably want to drill a small pilot hole and then a bigger hole, otherwise it can crack. So if it's acrylic, you can still drill it, just be more careful than if you've got the wood mount. Alright, so we're all done with this piece. So this is going to screw into your rec room using these screws. And so the screw is going to go in like so. And then you're going to have the spacer on the other side of it to give enough room for these little parts that stick out a little bit. Okay, so that's how that's going to work. And then you'll put the diffuser panel using those same hex screws as before, but you'll have a different panel that's slightly shorter. So now let's mount our Pixelcade board. So here's our Pixelcade new board mount. And what we're going to do is we're going to take these same nylon hex machine screws on the inner ones. So on these 4 inner ones, let's just attach this. Okay, and we'll just take our board here. It says USB, so we can line up the USB where that is, like so. Oops, start that over. Okay. And then take these 4 guys and just use that to attach it. And then you can see these, there's where we can mount it in our rec room somewhere. So we'll save that for later. And that'll mount basically somewhere on the inside of the cab. We'll find a spot for that. The kit comes with 2 sets of wood screws. So there's a longer wood screw that we'll use to mount the Pixelcade, and then there's a shorter set of wood screws. That's what we can use to mount this guy. Okay, so those are the 8 wood screws that the conversion kit comes with. So we got our board all set. The longer ribbon cable is going to go in here. And then we'll connect the other end of this to the back of this guy here. Okay, so this is basically going to be on the inside of the cabinet, so we need to actually drill a hole somewhere behind where we're going to mount this guy to thread this guy through. So the hole basically needs to be as big as this. So that's about 1 inch. So we need to drill a 1 inch diameter hole somewhere on your base plate, probably more towards the outside here. I guess it doesn't matter, maybe in the middle, because we also have these as well. So if we drill the hole around the middle, we could string these through. Okay, so now let's go do that right now. We've got one of these bits, I think it's called like a Foster bit, I'm not sure the exact name, but these are pretty good for drilling larger holes. If not, you can just use whatever you have. So this is what I'm going to use to drill it. So we basically want to drill that 1 inch hole. Let's drill it from the back. And if I look here, just to give you the reference, so there's the coin door. You want to drill it about right here. Again, that's the coin door, just to give you the reference. I'm going to drill that 1 inch hole right there. Here's the front of it. And you can see that hole there on the front side. So here's our mount. And so in the back, we've got these 3 cables. And so we're going to route these cables through that hole we just made. And then also make sure that the arrow here, when it's like this, it's pointing up. If you don't do that, then it's going to be upside down and you unfortunately have to redo it. So make sure that arrow, when it's right side up, it's pointing up. And so just go ahead and route these wires through. And then this is how it's going to go, like this. Okay, so at this point, we basically need to take this little spacer right here, and we're just going to put this right where our screw is. Okay, and then we pre-drill those holes, and now we can just screw it in. And I'll not screw it in all the way because I'm going to do all the sides first. I'll just get started, and I'll come back to the other sides. Okay, so here we are on the other side. So I'm going to take my ribbon cable, plug it into the board, take my male DC jack, also plug it into the board. On the board we can just mount like so. And so we got enough clearance here for the coin door. So I'm just going to drill some pilot holes. Then we'll just use our wood screws and screw it right in. Okay, so we're just tightening up these screws. And we're all good. And this is where the power is going to plug into 5 volts, 10 amp power supply to power up your Pixelcade LED.